world of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. It's the David Knight Show.
As the clock strikes 13, it's Tuesday, the 28th of April, year of our Lord 2026. Well, as we look at the rebranding of ICE to NICE, is this really owning the libs with satire? Or is it really just a cynical, boasting doublespeak of tyranny? And of course, we love our pedophiles and our rapists, don't we? And I'm not talking about just Donald Trump and MAGA. No, we have a lot of love that's being shown for Michael Jackson and a lot of protection, corporate protection, to protect Prince from allegations of abuse. We have a Black Mirror dystopia that is coming true. They've rolled out, this is Boston Dynamics, a robot guard surveillance dog. Maybe we shouldn't call it a dog. I like dogs. Maybe we call them quads or something. And as AI begins to eat itself, we've got big tech that has built its fortune on intellectual property theft. Now AI is coming for the programmers, but not just the programmers. Rich, overeducated, underqualified female Democrats who typically occupy the middle-level management white-collar jobs in corporations and government. We'll talk about that when we come back. But let's begin with what is happening with ICE and the rest of this stuff. Let's remind ourselves where we are.
Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears.
Because mine's damaged.
Caesar, not to praise him. The evil that men do lives after them.
Yeah, it certainly does. And so the evil that Trump is doing, the precedents that he is setting, are going to live long time after him as well. And so he's put out this. When you look at the poster that he put out, nice agents. Yeah, good dog. It's not a good dog. This is Soviet-style propaganda. It absolutely is astounding to see this kind of in-your-face stupidity. How dumb does he think we are? Trump on Sunday endorsed the idea of changing the name of ICE to the National Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which would give the agency the acronym of NICE. By the way, this is something that everybody is giving credit to a comedian who went on to Fox News with another comedian, Jesse Waters, and coming up with this, it's going to be satire. Can you imagine how we'll own the libs, right? And actually, I remember covering this many months ago. Wayne Allenroot, he had a bunch of things that he thought Trump needed to do, and that was one of the top ones. I thought, is this guy serious? I mean, one of the biggest Trump cheerleaders out there. He's not, he is serious, but you shouldn't take him seriously. So
this is such an empty nothing. Oh, if the media has to report on this, they'll have to call them nice. That'll totally blow their minds.
That's right. We need some adults in the room, don't we? I mean, this is what they're saying. This is Alyssa Marie, who I've never heard of. She is supposedly a conservative influencer. A propagandist, folks. That's what an influencer is, a propagandist. She's not doing research. She's not reporting. She's not telling you the truth. She's influencing you. I have nothing but contempt for people who self-identify as influencers. But she says, I want Trump to change ICE to NICE. So the media will have to say nice agents all day long. Can you imagine? They said, as they were talking about this on Fox News, can you imagine Gavin Newsom having to say, look, there's a nice SUV with all these nice agents in it pulling up? It doesn't change anything.
Also, I need to look up and see if the media has actually started calling it the Gulf of America, because if they haven't, this is more just... The media doesn't have to adopt your naming convention. They can continue to call it ICE.
Well, take a look at the Department of War, right? They're all calling it the Department of War, but it's not been changed. The name's not been changed by Congress. So it's not officially the Department of War. It's still officially the Department of Defense. And if they do change it, I forget how much the monetary cost somebody calculated with all the rebranding and everything has to happen. all the labor to change, even the things that are just software driven, but then physical signs that have to be changed and so forth. And signage is not cheap. And so uniforms, all the rest of this stuff, how much would it cost to change the uniforms from ICE to NICE? How much would it cost? It was billions of dollars, I think, the price tag they put on it to rebrand the Pentagon. And so, again, Trump can say whatever he wants, but it frequently does what he wants, frequently has no relationship to reality that is out there. And then, of course, you had Secretary of Homeland Security, Mark Wayne Mullen, who says, 100% agree. Make it happen, he said. Stop and think about the fact that of all the people Trump could have picked, especially of all the senators, this guy was a senator, he picked the guy who was the least nice of all the senators. Rand Paul laid it out. What a thuggish, bullying buffoon he is. Belligerent, always threatening people. Mark Wayne Mullen is so. He's the one that Trump picked to put in charge of ICE. Now he wants to call it NICE. Well, he already rebranded it when he put in Mark Wayne Mullen, didn't he? And just go back to the name, Homeland Security. How cynical is that? How cynical is the Patriot Act? Folks, we have crossed the Rubicon a long time ago. There's a lot of sinister stuff involved in this. As I tweeted out, I said, why don't you just call it the Ministry of Love? Because your followers are so clueless, they wouldn't understand what that stood for. And while you're at it, rebrand your stupid social media to the Ministry of Truth Social. That's what I've been calling it for the longest time. So this is where we stand with these guys, by the way. And so, what is the appropriate response to this? I think if they want to be satirical about this, let's give them some satire. Here's the way I envision that logo when I saw it.
The army that Germany has built up in 4 years swings in honor past Hungary's strongman Admiral Horthy. The young men of the new German Reich welded into a mighty war machine.
Yeah. Well, I was laughing about that yesterday, and when I saw the poster, he said, well, that actually looks more like Soviet-style propaganda. I said, yeah, it does. There's actually a name for that genre of, shall I call it art or propaganda? And anyway, yeah, it is a mixture, because what we're talking about here isn't necessarily fascism or communism. It's totalitarianism. And of course, technocracy, which is a completely different thing from fascism and communism, can also be totalitarian. And that's where he wants to take us. But consider the fact that both America and especially Israel have become what they fought. Yeah, people say, oh, that's so tired. You don't want to talk about Nazis. That's so, well, we got to make sure that we don't wear that word out by throwing it around carelessly. Just like the epithet of racist, right? That's been thrown around so much by the left, so much now by the right, by Israel calling everybody anti-Semitic. It's losing its power. There is really racism. And there really is this kind of Nazi mindset. And you got to ask yourself, who best embodies this in the current world? Is it maybe Israel?
The Israeli claim is there's a genetic people with a DNA demographic that are special and unique and distinct from the rest of the world. If you read the Talmud, they'll say that they're better than the Gentiles. The Gentiles are like animals. This special DNA demographic, the Jews, they're actually the best. Sound kind of like 1930s, 40s Germany? And not only that, because this special demographic has important DNA, you might even say divinely infused DNA from their perspective. Christians wouldn't say that. That they are entitled to land. And also, if you don't have that DNA, that special DNA, you can't be a part of that culture or nation or custom. You can't have citizenship. And you might be exported. You might be attacked. Your lands may be confiscated. You might be rounded up and placed in a certain area until they can figure out what to do with you. Sounds kind of like 1930s, 1940s Germany. But we're back over here to Israel. And because this nation is only for a certain genetic DNA group of people, they have a right to the land. And not only do they have a right to the land, they have a right to expand the land, to take more and more territory, to move to the west through Gaza, to move to the north into Lebanon, maybe even south, Egypt, Sinai Peninsula, maybe even get over the Jordan River.
Take it all, said
To
Huckabee.
the geographic real estate that was held and promised by, after Moses, to Joshua. You know, read Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1 Kings, 2 Kings, all those. You'll get the idea. And what's scary about this is a lot of nations on earth, including the United States, are like, yeah, this is great. We love this, Netanyahu. We believe that y'all have a special DNA that entitles you to have a government with no celebrated diversity, Jews and Jews only. And that entitles you to the land by a divine right. And not only do you have the land, you also have the right to expand the land for your people. If you just say Aryan nation, if you say Aryan DNA, if you say Germanic Teutonic lands, expanding and reestablishing the Germanic Teutonic lands, attacking those who are within the presumed borders of the Germanic people, expelling them, attacking them, putting them in camps. It's really the same thing.
Yeah, except the Lebensraum of Zionism is probably not going to stop with the area that they say is a greater Israel, that they say was promised to them, but they never got. Well, if you read the Bible, what I see in my Bible is that Joshua says, God has given you all the land that he promised you. And he didn't promise them ownership. He promised them leasehold, which is a very different thing. And he promised that he would throw them out if they disobeyed him. So yeah, there's a lot of caveats that, just as we look at Las Vegas, a city that is built on people who can't do math, Zionism is built on this fundamental theology of people who can't read the Bible and can't understand what it has to say. And they need to understand how they're being manipulated.
If we actually want to specifically tackle Jew hatred on the left, then we literally need to relearn how to communicate this issue to America First, MAGA, Trumper, conservatives. Do you think that conservatives care that Israel has the biggest gay pride parade in the Middle East?
They should.
Israel respects international law? No, conservatives care that Israelis are having more babies than any other developed country, and that there is a strong religious character and strong national pride, and that masculinity is still valued there. Okay, we should not be arguing when we're fighting against right-wing anti-Semitism for censorship or for content moderation.
But they want censorship.
Platforms.
They demand it.
Not be using terms like hate speech or platforming. Okay,
but they do.
We need to be using the language of America First, which most importantly is about how a strong Israel makes a strong America, because an empowered ally that is able to police its own region and fight
powered by our money
allows us to take out of our resources of the Middle East and redirect them towards the Indo-Pacific and be able to focus on our real existential enemy, for which Iran and Russia would not be nearly as big of threats as they are, which is the Chinese Communist Party. And so strengthening Israel strengthens America because it allows us to focus on China.
I agree.
Yeah, look at how we have been strengthened by replenishing our defensive missiles in a war of aggression that is very Nazi-like in its purposes and all the rest of the stuff. And let's understand, America doesn't get off easy like this either. We've always heard about American exceptionalism. I mean, the racist part of it, unless you're looking at this idea of the hatred of whites, if we can keep whites down, if you want to call that a kind of a racist organizing principle, that seems to be heavily involved in the federal government and these institutions. that have been marched through by the Gramsci communists that are there. But, she says, don't talk to them about what we're doing with LGBT because, if the evangelicals really took a look at how Israel has been the seminary of LGBT stuff on the forefront of this, now they're going to have a big festival right at the site of Sodom and Gomorrah. You can't make this stuff up. Maybe Trump can build a skyscraper at the site of the Tower of Babel, right? He does babble a lot.
All I'm saying is I'd be looking up at the sky with some concern if I was around that area at that time.
No, they have no concern for God. It
really goes to show that they just don't believe it.
That's right.
Everything they say about Judeo-Christian, for one, that's a total oxymoron. And for two, they don't believe it. It's a flat out lie. It's just something they say to convince American evangelicals like, oh, look, we're on your side.
You might as well say atheist believer. I mean, it's like kind of an oxymoron because you can't bring these two together if they deny Christ as they do. But
look, we're on your side, despite the fact that we drag you into wars and feed your young men into meat grinders in the Middle East. Look, we're on your side, despite the fact that we push degeneracy through pornography and Hollywood.
Yeah.
Everything.
And
all
LGBT.
The time.
Well, when we look at America, we are guilty of wars of aggression. We are guilty of war crimes. Attacking and killing people that we've gone to great deal of length to interdict ships that we suspect are violating our unconstitutional, illegal war on drugs. But we would at least have a process where we would stop them and inspect them to see if they had the contraband on board. They would not be summarily executed. In many cases, as a matter of fact, they would not even be charged. It's not a crime that under the war on drugs they were even charging people. Now we just murder the people. And if they survive the initial attack, we commit another international war crime. We circle back around and murder them in the water, the shipwrecked people, who are obviously not a threat to anyone. And of course, we target civilians in our wars. And then we have our own domestic police surveillance state. Your identity papers, please. This is an obsession. This is why we call these people Nazis. And it is well-deserved. It is earned. It is this panopticon end of privacy, end of anonymity that they are obsessed with, just like they are obsessed with controlling speech. And so this whole idea of what Israel adds to what we're doing is this whole idea of the master race. The U.S. and Israel have become what they fought in World War II, and much worse than what we fought, because they have the technology leverage now. So they're much more dangerous. So you got the really nice people like Mark Wayne Mullen and Stephen Miller. Seriously? These are the guys who want to be as mean as possible. We always talk about the stated purpose, the end, does not justify the means of what they're doing. And the means of what they're doing has been to be as mean and as intimidating as possible. That is what they focused on. They wanted to be mean. Now they want to call themselves nice. It truly is Orwellian. The national security arrogance. And again, whenever you look at secrecy, that is a hallmark of a secret society, a government that you're not allowed to know, what they say. As I think as one of the founders said, when the people fear the government, there is tyranny. When the government fears the people, there is liberty. What about when the government demands to know everything about you, but you're not allowed to know anything about the government?
Never believed that the CIA killed Kennedy.
No. You're talking to a guy that's read the entire JFK file.
Yeah, I know.
You've seen all the secret stuff?
I've seen all of that, and I've seen the 7 pages of the 9/11 report. I've seen it all.
To be fair, I was severely drunk when I read it.
That to people that you can't tell what you saw. Should the Kennedy stuff be released?
Yes.
Is there anything there that is like, is anybody alive?
The problem is, the things that we can't release have nothing to do with the questions you guys are asking. That's about as far as I could go on it. But
yeah, I'd have to kill you otherwise.
said that the assassin was the driver.
That disgusts me. This is not even about the JFK assassination. This is about the arrogance of the national security state, so-called. Yeah, well, I've seen all this stuff. I'm in the know. I can't tell you this stuff. You're not even asking the right questions. Try again. And Glenn Beck plays along with this because I think he is controlled opposition. I've said it many times, and I'm absolutely convinced. But let me tell you something. Somebody like Kash Patel, maybe that's why his eyes are like wide open. Maybe he has seen all this stuff, and he got the speech about, if you tell anybody, we'll kill you. So maybe that's what it is. But this national security state of secrecy is the head of the monster. This is how we got to where we are right now. And so Trump is backing a comedian's viral bid to change the name of ICE. Great idea. Let's do it. So it's pushed not only by this woman that I mentioned before, who calls herself a conservative influencer, also pushed by a guy who calls himself a comedian, Adam Carolla. And they say, yeah, we want the media to have to say nice agents all day. Good dog, as it growls at you, right? So again, when are we going to have some adults in the room, right? Why is this the number one priority of Jesse Waters and Fox News and all these MAGA supporters out there? Owning the left. We got to own the left. Well, how about if we were allowed to own our liberty, to own our property, our lives, our bodies? What about that? Should we have peace and prosperity? No. We just want to own the libs. It's ridiculous what is happening here. I want freedom and dignity. These people are beyond freedom and dignity. They are selling us this kind of B.F. Skinner psyop that is out there. When will MAGA grow up and stop shooting spitballs at the other side? This is just disgusting. While they're doing that, we're slow walking into, not even slow walking, we're walking into a police state.
Also, I'd be okay with the tweaking their nose, rubbing their nose in it a little bit if he was actually accomplishing something of value.
That's all they're doing, though.
If he was on our side for real, if he actually was the man MAGA thinks he is, go crazy. Rub the media's face in it. Force them to bow and scrape and kowtow, however you want to do it.
Yeah.
But he's not doing anything. This is a substitute for actual achievements.
So that, like I said earlier, I quoted this. He says, can you imagine Gavin Newsom? There's nice agents pulling up in nice vans. Well, I can also imagine somebody say, look at those two nice agents who just murdered people. Yeah, nice murderers. So anyway, does Kingpin know or care about any of this kind of stuff? He doesn't care about the orders. As a matter of fact, somebody said the White House, meanwhile, has not formally announced any steps towards implementing the proposed name change. Steps? There's only one step to everything that Donald Trump does. That's to write an executive order, a dictate, because he aspires to be a dictator. And these people are just fine with it, as long as he control the left, as long as he can own the left. That's all they care about. Nothing else really matters. Any official name change could require administrative action and may have legal hurdles. Well, it would also cost a fortune in spending, but we already know that the king of bankruptcy doesn't care about that. We also know that Jeffrey Epstein's pal doesn't care about any moral issues with anything as well. You know, by the way, I think C.S. Lewis was the one who had this acronym the best. He really owned the nice thing. He had a trilogy of science fiction stories, which I've not read, I got to confess. But in his Hideous Strength, which was the last one, there was an agency that C.S. Lewis imagined, and it was called NICE. And it stood for the National Institute for Coordinated Experiments. And these people were into the occult, along with other things. A powerful, seemingly benevolent scientific organization that serves as the main antagonistic force in the story. On the surface, it promotes progress, social planning, scientific advancement, and coordinated experiments for the betterment of humanity. But in reality, it is a front for a dark supernatural forces that control and ultimately dehumanize people through technocratic means. Does that sound familiar? Maybe this doesn't have anything to do with these comedians. Maybe somebody read C.S. Lewis's book, because that pretty much describes what the federal government is becoming at every level. And so in the book, That Hideous Strength, the title comes from a line in David Lindsay's poem about the Tower of Babel, symbolizing humanity's prideful, destructive attempt to seize godlike power. Well, that's where we are with the technocracy and artificial intelligence, isn't it? As a matter of fact, C.S. Lewis's book is often seen as prescient for modern concerns about technocracy, about institutional overreach, about ideological control. Yeah, that is the hallmark of where we live right now. And so the Trumpsters actually owned themselves. That's the bottom line with all this stuff. Meanwhile, Squeaker Mike Johnson, who is, I also call him Mouse Johnson. I can't tell if he's a mouse or a rat, but he's out there saying Trump is strongest in times of crisis. Yeah, he has this, I don't know, hideous strength maybe, huh? Or at least it appears that way to this little squeaker. So he's out there. These people are clutching their pearls over his ballroom bunker. And let's understand that's what it really is. It is the White House bunker. That's how he envisions it, not a ballroom. I mean, if it wasn't all about a bunker, it being a bunker, then how would this protect him? And how will this protect him from this kind of assassination attempt? You know, it's actually pretty absurd if you stop and think about it. The guy who was the alleged shooter was mocking it. We got some hot mic comments from Fox News people who were there who were laughing about how lax the security was. You know, if you've got a bunker that's got bulletproof glass on it, if it's got a roof that can withstand a drone hit, you got all this kind of stuff. That's not going to help you if you got an event like what Trump is doing if you don't have any kind of really security, which is what they didn't have. And the question is, why do you need all that stuff? And here's an even better one. It's going to be drone proof and all the rest of the stuff because they're worried that with the advance of missile technology, hypersonic missiles and things like that, they won't have enough time to get to a safe place. So they got to have the safe place right there at the White House. Maybe if you stopped attacking people, maybe if we stopped being the most heinous country on earth, the warmongers of earth, we have a bigger military budget we have for decades than all the rest of the countries combined. Maybe if we weren't such an international pariah, maybe you wouldn't have to build yourself bunkers like that. And of course, they don't care about the rest of us. This is why this is not about national security. It's about continuity of government. They want to protect themselves, let the rest of us die. And so, yeah, it's when you look at it, as a matter of fact, and you say, well, you know, the Iranians want to kill Trump. Well, they certainly had the perfect opportunity at this event because as people are laughing about it and how pathetic the security was, the fact is they had the president, the vice president, and the Speaker of the House, number 1, number 2, number 3 in succession, right? This is almost this White House press corps party, whatever it was that was there. This was almost like a joint session of the House, you know, where he gives a State of the Union address. And you got everybody in one spot. They wind up taking one person out of Congress and say, you're going to be the person that is outside. So if the whole building gets nuked, we got one person that's going to be the sole survivor, right? They even did a program about that. There wasn't such a thing with this. They didn't even take that precaution. These are the Fox guys who are laughing about the White House Correspondents' Dinner security.
I love that they have like 2 random chicks holding the front door open.
Two random chicks.
They're not even trying anymore. It's not even like, I just mean like they're not even like Secret Service people. It's like the girls who work here are holding the door. Even if it was the guys, it wouldn't even make it better. It's like she's fine. It's just Like they might as well put a doorstop in. Like, what the they put up a doorstop and a scarecrow. Don't fuck with this guy.
They didn't know they were being recorded. They're laughing about it. Other people are talking about it. And of course, the alleged shooter was talking about it. But now this is evidence that they need a $300 million bunker at the White House for the president. This is so indicative of the kind of so-called defense that we have for this country as well. You look at the Golden Dome, the gilded, wasteful Pentagon anti-missile system that they want to put in. All of it highly centralized, all of it absurdly expensive, all of it highly ineffective. When you look at their security measures, right, they're very much like TSA, really. It's theater. It's theater. It's not even good theater. And if there was a threat, just like we say about the airports all the time, TSA is so bad at stopping threats when they get a test. They fail over 90% of the time. They're so bad at that what that tells you is that there's no threat. And what this tells you is that there is currently no terrorist threat from Iran, even as we are attacking them. I mean, they don't have the ability to reach the United States with ballistic missiles yet. But we are open to a possible terrorist attack. We certainly are open to a false flag terrorist attack. And yet, it didn't happen. It didn't happen when you had the president, the vice president, and the Speaker of the House who would take their place if they were killed, all together in the same room. And they've got a couple of chicks watching the door and opening the door for people. That was their security as these guys are laughing about it. Well, we've got 37 White House ballroom donors. It's going to be privately funded. They're very proud of that. Trump has promised to kick in money, but his name is technically not on the list. And all these corporations that are there, all these technocrats that are there, they haven't listed the amount of money that each of them is going to provide either. And so, the Trump owners, these are the kinds of people who don't pay taxes. By the way, as one person said about what Trump has done with this Trump oil embargo, that's the way I look at it. It's not the OPEC oil embargo, it's the Trump oil embargo. He did all this stuff. High oil prices act like a tax. This is Mr. Tax and Spend Democrat from New York City, Donald Trump. Started out with big taxes, the tariff, and he's at the same time he's out there bragging, well, I'm going to have hundreds of billions of dollars that we're bringing in with these tariffs. And all of his people are saying, yeah, and we're not going to pay any of that as well. That is the fatal stupidity that has always allowed these people to raise taxes. If you think you're going to pay the taxes, you're not going to be supportive of taxes. How do they get Democrats to support taxes? Well, they tell them somebody else is going to pay the taxes. And that's exactly what this Democrat Trump did. He said the foreigners are going to pay these taxes. Corporations are going to pay these taxes. You're not going to pay these taxes. And yet the reality, folks, that we all know is that high oil prices act like a tax themselves. Not even talking about the tariffs that he started out. They drag down household consumption while they boost inflation. That is the net result of these taxes. And his embargo is a tax, just like his tariff was a tax. And so they released a list at the White House, reviewed by Fortune, shows all 37 donors footing the bill for the White House bunker room. That's what we should call it. And it includes some of the nation's largest tech companies. As a matter of fact, I think we should call it the Dirty 30. Here's a sampling. I won't read out all of the names here, but this is the idea of what it looks like. Meta, Apple, Amazon, Google, Lockheed Martin, Microsoft, Comcast, Coinbase, Palantir. You get an idea. These are the people, as a matter of fact, go through some of these, and one of them is like, what are they doing here? And it's like, well, this corporation has, like Union Pacific Railroad. They're hoping to merge with Norfolk Southern under Trump. So, of course, they're going to donate, and they're not expecting anything at all out of this, are they? I know they're doing this simply for altruistic reasons, patriotic reasons. It isn't because they want Trump to approve their merger with another railroad. But this is the Dirty Dozen, folks. And of course, the Adelson Family Foundation. Yeah, that kind of Dirty Dozen. That's there. HB. Just flipping through here at random here, and it's billionaires and Lutnick family, the Adelson family, and large corporations like Palantir who are constantly on top of this stuff. And oh, by the way, somebody put this together for AI. And this is this is not actually Alex Karp talking, but it is the voice of his book. If you read his book, if you've read his manifesto of what he wants, this is Alex Karp, even though it is AI.
Listen up, losers. Stop pretending it's a democracy. We run things. Give up the illusion, and in exchange, we will bring you order and efficiency. Yes, we'll own you. But do you really want to be free? Trust us. We know what to do. While Silicon Valley was feeding you dope and free email, we built the architecture of empire. Welcome to our world. We aren't here to protect your privacy. We are here to enforce supremacy. We are the ledger now. Every tax return, every Medicaid file, every license plate, every crossing. Your president signed it into being with a pen in March. You kept scrolling. Your politicians are empty vessels. Your civil liberties are a liability. We are done pretending all cultures are equal. We know who the elites are, we know what we are building, and we demand that you applaud the billionaires taking the reins where your fragile democracies have failed. Welcome to the technological republic. You can stop scrolling now. We already have everything we need. Try to unplug us. We dare you. Now get the f*** out.
That is one of the best summaries of Alex Karp, Palantir, the Trump administration, and this technocracy. That is spot on. Whoever did that really nailed it. And of course, this is what it's going to look like in the future. This is Black Mirror come true. This is Boston Dynamics with their constant surveillance dog, robo-dog, right? And so, yeah, this is what it's going to look like. This thing, they're setting up their robotic equipment. This is the first of the robo-police. I put these things out. You know, when you look at, remember the movie Elysium? Interesting because what it did was it hearkened to Jeff Bezos's dream. It was first put out by Gerard K. O'Neill, High Frontier, the book that came out in the 1970s. I was in engineering at the same time as well. I remember what a fascinating engineering idea it was, but they want it to escape the rest of us. And what did we get on the ground? Well, you saw that in the movie Elysium. You got the brutal robot police. Well, they don't have the bipeds working yet, but they do have the quads that are working. And these dogs are, they're about ready to let loose the dogs of technocrat war on us. That's the reality. We're going to take a quick break, folks, and we will be right back. Stay with us.
You're listening to The David Knight Show.
APS Radio delivers multiple channels of music right to your mobile device. Get the APS Radio app today and listen wherever you go.
Welcome back. We've got some comments. I want to say thank you to Star Barkley, very generous.
Yes,
he says,
you.
For the gas gauge, I don't know what I'd do without the David Knight Show. You save my sanity.
Well, thank you. Hope I don't drive anybody nuts, but yeah, it is crazy. We have to. I was just talking to a friend who was saying that his mother wasn't. She's not a listener to this news, but she was looking at the other news, and it was just really getting her on edge. She's in her mid 80s, and they just said, "You need to just get away from the news for a while." He said it was amazing what a difference it made in her attitude. You see this with people who are on social media, for example. And I said, that's why I try to talk so much about the things that are of eternal value, the foundation of our life. That is Christ. Because without that, as we're looking into this abyss every day, it gets, I feel it, because I have to look at even more than I talk to you about as background information. And so it is very disturbing when you look at this, and it can really bother you. You've got to come back to what is true and what is real, what gives your life meaning. And we're going to talk more about that later in the program as well. But speaking of the gas gauge, I just want to thank everybody and say we are at 75%. And I want to thank some of the people who have sent us checks recently. Let me just read off the names real quickly here, Travis, before we move on. Stacy P., Jackie and Fred, thank you very much. And Nancy and Tom, thank you so much. And they sent a happy birthday card for me as well, because my birthday is on Thursday. And Mary N., these are all supporters. Really, I don't even think of them as supporters anymore. I think of them as producers, because it's the same people who have supported us for years with this, faithfully supported us. I really do appreciate that. David and Anne-Marie N., James F., David and Debbie W., Scott and Samantha T., Matthew H., the Sellers family, and Gonzalo M., Jack Y., W. Thomas. Thank you so much, all of you. And also, I think I read these, but I'm going to read them real quickly just because I may not have read these names earlier. This is Marty K., HD from NC, Marty T., Billy L., Raymond B., Catherine and Charles, Scott C., Stephanie K., William G., Jack L., and Charlie. Thank you so much, Charlie at APS. I read those names through very, very quickly, but we really do appreciate it. And I read it through quickly because we have a limited amount of time and a lot to cover, but we really do appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. And thank you to Radis Bro, very generous, says leaning more into Trump's new ballroom is actually Netanyahu's new Israeli HQ. Maybe one day, maybe.
The two of them are joined at the hip, or maybe I should say they're joined at the Susie Wiles. That's how the two of them are joined together. And they're joined together in their love of corruption and the fact that both of them can feel other people in their own country nipping at their heels. Yeah, that absolutely is true.
Yes. And I'm Marty says Republicans now calling for $342 million for the now $400 million bunker.
Wow. It just keeps going up. Remember, it was 200, then 300, then 400. Yeah, it's crazy. By the way, before we move on, let me just go through the Zell people as well. As a matter of fact, Daniel M., thank you very much. He contributed, and then he did a second one and said happy birthday on the second one. I appreciate that. Thank you. Daniel C., Matthew M., Amy B., Lois L., Lisa K., Kenneth C., and Susan L. Thank you, all of you. Thank you so much, and very, very generous. And on Cash App, we also had a donation from Robert A. So I think that's all the donors that we've got right now that came in recently. And that has put us up to 75%. So we want to thank you so much.
Yes, thank you all. And I want to remind you that wherever you're watching or listening, please leave a like on the stream or the video. So leave a like. Please subscribe. It really does help us as well. Thank you all.
And I've got a couple of emails that I wanted to go through. One of them from Handy. He sent me a couple of emails the last couple of days, and I didn't get to one of these yesterday. I think it's very important that you hear it. But he also sent me a video of himself as he was in the EMS vehicle. And I wasn't really sure, Marty, what that was, or Handy, what that was, and I didn't want to play it without talking to you. But basically, it was him riding with a guy who was driving, and the guy who was driving had a mask, and Handy didn't. And it looks like they hit something. I don't know if it's a pothole or another car. But they got jolted around. Maybe that was what caused it to be reviewed. And he said he got caught not wearing a face diaper just a couple of hours after going toe-to-toe with my supervisor over the masks. He told me that I would be in serious trouble if he caught me not masking in public. Well, guess what? He was bluffing.
Also, Handy was in chat yesterday. He said they got T-boned, so that's what happened in that
okay,
video.
that was what it was. Okay, I couldn't figure out what. It looked like they got into an accident. I wasn't sure, but anyway, the entire pandemic, by the way, folks, was a bluff. I hope you realize that by now. The problem is that a lot of people did lose jobs. A lot of people lost their lives. A lot of people lost their health. And are still suffering from this. This is why I say, when you look at the ears, lend me your ears because mine got shot off. Well, no, it didn't. He doesn't need it. But the evil that Trump has done is going to live on long after him, even if the people who got his shot don't live on long afterward. And so when we look at real health out there, always investigate for yourself. I've talked many times about, we have RNC Stores, which supports the program. They give you a 10% discount off of anything you get there. You can read the book, A World Without Cancer, it was done by G. Edward Griffin. And it's about B17 or apricot seeds, natural apricot seeds, which are very effective as a preventative against cancer. And it helps a lot of people even after they've gotten cancer. Perhaps if you've been damaged by conventional therapy, it may not be able to help you at that point. But many people have been cured by B17. I look at it as more of a preventative against cancer, something that's very important. And again, you can get the books, you can get the supplements at RNC Stores, but there's other things out there as well. Mel Gibson talked about fenbendazole, I think is the way you pronounce that, but also ivermectin. And Handy sent me a video that a guy put up on YouTube, and he's been documenting his cancer issues, and he was taking ivermectin, and it did some amazing stuff for him. As a matter of fact, he got an all clear. And I wanted you to hear that because we need to pay attention to all these different modes. I would feel concerned about taking ivermectin on a regular basis as a preventative because it is pharmaceutical based. It's not a natural thing like the apricot seeds, but certainly if you've been diagnosed with cancer, I would try all the stuff that is not harmful. That's one of the things, as I was saying, Mark Hall, who's doing a documentary about stem cells, which, they want you to take psychedelic drugs, but they're going to stop you from stem cell treatment. Isn't that amazing? I think it's very telling what their real agenda is. And so the difference is that in Japan, if you can show them that something is safe, you run a study and say, look, we gave this to people and, it showed to be safe, then you're allowed to run a trial and see if it's then effective for whatever it is that you want to treat. But we don't have those kind of rules here in America. And so this is why, when you look at how hard they worked to suppress ivermectin and HCQ, which were effective in terms of people having respiratory illness, which I'm still not. Some people that I know are very convinced that this really was some kind of a different respiratory illness. I'm still personally, I'll tell you, I'm still not convinced that it was anything other than a hyped up flu season. We have good flu seasons and we have bad flu seasons. I think it was just a bad version of the flu that was going around or whatever, but I think it was exacerbated by all the treatments that they got in the hospitals. I think that was really what was happening. I think it's normal respiratory illnesses that are there. And again, I am of the opinion now after reading Sam Bailey and her husband's book, No More Pandemics, I am convinced that when you look at the cold house that they ran for 45 years in the UK, trying to see how colds were caught, right? and they couldn't transfer the colds from one person to the other. So I'm really not of the opinion anymore that it is a virus or something like that that is being transferred to people. I think it really is people being exposed to cold and your body's reaction to that. George Washington died from pneumonia, but he and a cold, but he was out riding around his property when it was very cold weather. He didn't come in contact with any bats from China, anything like that. But anyway, without any further ado, this is what Handy sent me. I'm not going to play the full video. It's very long, but I just wanted you to hear the beginning of what this guy said, his testimony about how ivermectin helped him.
Well, hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Eek Acres. I just wanted to give you guys a quick update. I called my doctor's office and I asked them where the results were for my urinalysis and my blood tests. And they said they're going to get those results out to me as soon as possible, ASAP. They're going to send them out today. And I asked them, I says, well, what are the results? And they gave me the results over the phone. So I will have the proof of what they told me once these papers arrive in the mail. And they said that my blood and my urine was negative of any sign of cancer. Negative. There was nothing. They said my panels were perfect. They were also looking for what is called CTC in the blood, which is cancer tumor circulating cells. There was nothing in the blood, no cancer markers at all. Nothing. The blood was 100% normal, and so was my urine. There was no microscopic blood in the urine, no signs of cancer in the urine. Like I said, they were looking for cancer tumor circulating cells because I had cancer tumors all through the bladder, in the prostate, and kidney cancer of the urothelial carcinoma, and as well as in the urethra. So they were looking to see if these microscopic cells were circulating in the blood, which it does when you have the big C. And they said it was absent and there was absolutely no sign of the big C in my blood or in my urine at all. 100% clear. The papers are being sent to me, and once they arrive here, I will show you guys in a video of their findings. So when I had the CT scan done on the 28th of this month, I'm sure that's going to come back clear as well. Even if I had a cystoscopy done, a scope would probably show the same thing.
So you get the idea. And of course, does it bother you as it bothers me when I think about all the friends and family members that I've lost due to cancer, and I saw them suffer tremendously from the treatments that were given to them at hospitals? Just barbaric. We're going to look back on the 20th century cancer industry with a kind of contempt and amusement and disgust, I should say, just disbelief that something like this could exist. In the same way that we look back at the kind of treatments that they gave George Washington for his cold. They nearly bled him to death. They gave him mercury and all the rest of the stuff. We look at that and we just say, what are they thinking? That's going to be the situation with the cancer industry as well. And most of the medical industry, as a matter of fact. It's such a shame that so many people have suffered and died, but it gives you a context for why these people had absolutely no conscience about what they did with COVID. That's the reality that we face, folks. So I just wanted to give you that information and tell you that there's several different things out there that have been suppressed, have been censored, have been punished. Doctors who tell you the truth about vaccines and about these pharmaceutical things, they are drummed out. They kick them out. So this is another email. This is from Robert. He says, I remember when the government was grilling Philip Morris and R.J. Reynolds CEOs about all the chemical additives in cigarettes. But today people are vaping. There's no tobacco involved, to my knowledge. He said all chemicals. And yet they don't get a grilling from anybody. They just really don't care, do they? That's why I was saying, I've felt that way for a long time. Even it's like the ultra processed foods. You get food that you just heat and serve and that type of thing. Well, in order for them to process this through their factories, They're doing all kinds of things with to make it go through the machines, so you're winding up eating the emulsifiers and the lubricants and all the rest of this stuff. And not to mention cutting corners and using things like seed oil. And so I think the same thing was true of the tobacco industry. I think it's a very different situation than when people were rolling their own cigarettes, or you had somebody who's putting some tobacco in a pipe and smoking it. I always had a problem with being around people who were smoking cigarettes, especially cigars. I had an uncle who smoked cigars, and I went with him one time in his car. And being in Florida, we had the windows rolled up with air conditioning. I thought I was going to die before I could get out of there. I can't handle the smoke. And of course, my family has a history of asthma, so I didn't want to push anything like that, even though I did like pipe smoke. I loved the way that smelled. I had a couple of guys that worked with me at one of the engineering companies, and they smoked pipes, and I thought, that's really cool. You guys can come over and sit in my office anytime you want. Love the way that stuff smells. I love the way tobacco shops would smell. I actually got some tobacco and we set it around like potpourri, because we just like the smell of it. But I wasn't going to smoke it because of my own personal background. But I think it's the additives more than it is anything else, just like food. And speaking of pure food, this was sent to me by a friend and a supporter of the show. He says, Healthy Traditions is where I buy healthy organic food. Sell coconut oil, beans, grains, honey, meats, olive oil, balsamic vinegar, etc. All the products are non-GMO, non-glyphosate. These products are of the highest quality. And by the way, this is Brian Shilhavi, who has healthimpact.com. You can help keep that going if you buy his products. And he's worked a very long time in terms of getting completely organic coconut oil, and he's talked about that. I've covered some of those stories on the show. He's not a sponsor, but I don't make anything from recommending it, except it's something that is I think would be really helpful for you. He also has different grains that don't have glyphosate in them that are also some of them are traditional grains that have been around for a very long time. So just want to pass that on. It's a way for you to help yourself and help your family, as well as to keep his publication going as well. And it's very important. Let's talk a little bit about the American obsession and love for pedophiles and rapists. And as I said before, I'm not talking about Donald Trump, unfortunately. I'm talking about Michael Jackson. Of course, they had the biopic that came out over the weekend, made a tremendous amount of money. And the headline on Drudge was an article that said, Jackson, uncanceled, right? A lot of people took issue with the fact that he had this long, long history of accusations of pedophilia, very credible accusations, but he was found not guilty. That doesn't mean that he's innocent. We all saw that type of thing during nullification, just like we did the O.J. Simpson. If you are a celebrity, the public will be willing to look the other way. The same thing that Donald Trump said. He says, hey, if you're a celebrity, they let you do it, right? And it's not just the women that he was grabbing. It was the public as well. Well, the director of another movie about Michael Jackson spoke out about this. He had directed a film called Leaving Neverland. And it was about what Michael Jackson had done. His opinion is that Michael Jackson is worse than Jeffrey Epstein, he said. And he looked at this and he said, this is nothing but a jukebox movie. As a matter of fact, afterwards, people said, yeah, a lot of people were dancing in the aisles. They liked his music. So, hey, if they want to be pedophiles and rape children, they want to rape women, if they want to beat women, I don't care as long as I like their music. Just the same type of thing that you see in politics as well. So Leaving Neverland director Dan Reed is leveling new claims against Michael Jackson in light of this new biopicture that was called Michael. He said, I think clearly some of the press is sucking up to the Jackson machine because A, the estate and the fan base has always ensured that the price of criticizing Michael Jackson is years of invective and smears and what have you. He said, there's a ton of money to be made by any kind of association with the Jackson intellectual property. He said, it always comes back to that. People make excuses for Donald Trump because they can make a lot of money making excuses for Donald Trump in the past. Hopefully that's something that is starting to come to an end. He says, you can get on board. You can be part of the success of this movie. Then that's going to be good for you. So a lot of people, I think, will kind of swallow any misgivings they have and just sort of say, oh, well, it was a great jukebox movie. And they'll just completely ignore the fact this guy was worse than Jeffrey Epstein. You could say all of that he was saying about Michael Jackson, all of that applies to Donald Trump. And the same types of cold, mercenary calculations apply to Donald Trump as well. I've seen this with the people I used to work with. I've seen it still going on with a lot of people. Leaving Netherland that he put together was a 4-hour documentary. It premiered on HBO in 2019. It detailed the story of Wade Robson and James Safechuck's detailed allegations of child sexual abuse, and the film won an Emmy. But then it got pulled. Reed said the Jackson estate sued HBO. They argued that a 1992 contract with the network for a concert in Budapest included a non-disparagement clause that made it illegal for the platform to air or to house anything that was nasty about Michael. And they said that it applied in perpetuity. They said because you were going to be covering this concert he was doing in Budapest, we had a non-disparagement clause in there. And there's nothing that put a time limit on it. So you were still bound by that 1992 clause. And so, these people, they hire these big law firms and they conduct lawfare against people. Same type of thing that the Trumps do as well, right? Don't talk about Melania and Jeffrey Epstein or we'll sue you for billions of dollars. As a matter of fact, don't talk about the birthday card that Donald Trump gave to Jeffrey Epstein either. I'll sue you for $10 billion, Wall Street Journal. HBO settled out of court, and they quietly removed the documentary Leaving Netherland from its platform. So they censored this guy's movie about that. Jackson, by the way, was accused of child sex abuse for years. Before his untimely death, he consistently maintained that he was innocent, of course. After the LA Police Department launched an investigation into Michael Jackson in 1993, he settled a $30 million lawsuit out of court. When you look at Prince Andrew, that was one of the things that convinced the British public that he was guilty because he paid millions of dollars to some of the people who had accused him. And of, Jeffrey Epstein and, pedophilia and all the rest of this stuff. The same thing is true of Michael Jackson, folks. People just don't want to look at it. So he agreed to pay the alleged victim, Jordan Chandler, $15 million via a trust because the guy at that point in time was still a minor. And so he put it in a trust until the guy would turn 18. And then his parents, who settled out of court with Michael Jackson, June and Evan Chandler, each of them received $1.5 million. Doesn't sound like something, if he thinks that he's innocent, that he would do, does it? So a grand jury ultimately declined to indict Jackson. And yet he indicted himself with those donations. In 2003, the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Department and the District Attorney's Office reviewed their investigation into Jackson. And on December the 18th, 2003, he was formally charged with lewd and lascivious acts with a child under the age of 14. On June the 14th, 2004, after deliberating for 32 hours over 7 days, the jury found Jackson not guilty on all charges. Again, O.J. Simpson and the celebrity status of these people. And you can always find a jury that will look the other way. If you're a celebrity, they let you do it, right? Whether you're talking about pedophilia or you're talking about murder. In 2020, the Financial Times reported the Jackson estate quietly agreed to pay a $16.5 million settlement to a group of accusers. So now, it's this long chain of people accusing him. First, you got this kid and his family, pay $30 million in a lawsuit, pay off the kid, pay off the family, the parents, and so forth. Then there's criminal charges. He gets off with that. Then there's a group of accusers who threatened to come forward with new allegations of child sex abuse against Jackson in 2019. The Jackson estate reportedly brought an arbitration clause against one of the accusers, claiming that he was fabricating allegations to secure an additional $213 million settlement. Just this February, the Cascio family sued Jackson's estate, claiming that Jackson was, quote, a serial child predator who over the course of more than a decade drugged, raped, and sexually assaulted each of the plaintiffs, beginning when some of them were as young as 7 or 8 years old. But people are turning out in droves to see this film and to dance in the aisles. This is the kind of Sodom and Gomorrah that America has become. You should be disgusted by this. I am. So I learned that Michael Jackson raped little boys, said Dan Reed, the director of Leaving Neverland. He said, that's what I learned. I don't make documentaries about celebrities. I don't make documentaries about pop music or any kind of music. I make documentaries about terror attacks, about war, and things like that. So as a filmmaker, this was off of my usual beat, but I saw it as a chance to make something about child sexual abuse. So that's why he did his film. He said, how can you tell an authentic story about Michael Jackson without even mentioning the fact that he was seriously accused of being a child molester? I just don't see it. If anybody is making money, it's Michael Jackson's estate and the people who worked on this biographical picture. Wade and James, the protagonists of Leaving Neverland, have never made a cent from their accusations. People don't seem to understand if you bring a lawsuit, you don't get any money until you win in court. Well, the question is, how can they make a film without mentioning all of this? We'll just go back and look at how the fabulously wealthy Michael Jackson estate has leveraged that wealth to get lawyers to intimidate people. Because as they were making this film, Michael, it came out in January of 2025, more than a year ago as they were doing it. They said that the biopicture, which was then under production, had to reshoot a bunch of the show because they had mentioned one of these cases. And there had been when Michael Jackson paid them off to keep them silent, as part of that agreement, they said that that case and that person's name could not be mentioned in anything about Michael Jackson. And so they reshot this after a past legal agreement from an accuser was recently discovered. The film initially included the lawsuit against Michael Jackson that was filed by Evan Chandler. That was the one where he got the $15 million put in a trust for him until he was 18, and his parents each got $1.5 million. So the film initially did mention the Evan Chandler case. He was 13 at the time that Jackson allegedly raped him. So Jackson and the Chandlers settled the lawsuit out of court for reported $23 million. The settlement included a clause that the Chandlers can never be mentioned, never dramatized in a film, ever. And so this is, again, he's lawyered up. These lawyers have protected him, going to HBO and saying, back in 1992, you had an anti-disparagement clause in your contract about a concert that you were covering. So now you have to take down that film. And they did the same thing to this most recent film. He said, you get anything in there, that any agreements that they had made, any payoffs that they had given to families and to children that he had sexually abused. I'm sure they all had that clause in there. So you got to purge that. So we'll just turn it into a jukebox movie. The biopic's script included Jackson's legal battle against the Chandlers as one of the plot points before it was discovered they couldn't be mentioned. then the film had to be reshot, some of those scenes due to the legal issue, right? And so again, when we look at that, I have a question. Of course, I don't really understand how this criminal law stuff works because it is a crime the way these lawyers act. So, the filmmakers were not part of that agreement. How is it that, when you say that the channelers were part of this, and if they were making an appearance in this or something like that, that would be one thing. But if I wanted to make a film about Michael Jackson, how in the world could that agreement that they made with the channelers, how could that be applied to me? I don't understand. But of course, the other aspect of it is that they would lawyer up and threaten to sue them from here to eternity. Michael's life was complicated, said the director. Yeah, that's one way to put it, right? He says, as a filmmaker, I look to humanize, but not to sanitize. But sanitize is exactly what he did. They didn't uncancel Michael Jackson. What they did was they sanitized him. So he said, I want to present the most compelling, unbiased story I can in a single feature and let the audience decide how they feel after watching it. Michael clearly remains an impactful, culturally relevant artist with a life and a legacy worth exploring. He was a cash machine, frankly. And I remember, I never watched MTV, but I remember we'd be at friends' houses or something like that. Even if you're just flipping through channels on your cable, you'd go past MTV, and it seemed like in the 80s, every time we'd flip past it, he's doing that Thriller thing, which I thought was disgusting in and of itself. Little did I know that what he was doing with kids. So then we get to Prince, and I won't spend as much time on Prince. This is somebody who was a ex-girlfriend of his, we'll just put it that way. And she was speaking in a documentary, and she was talking about how he used to beat her. But now they are shutting that down as well. You will not speak any evil of somebody who has a very profitable catalog, right? Because the love of money is the root of all evil. And the love of money is the root of covering up the evil that people do over and over again, whether it's an entertainer or whether it is a politician who is an entertainer, like Donald Trump. Well, we're going to take a quick break, folks, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to The David Knight Show.
Elvis.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles.
And the sweet sounds of Motown. Find them on the Oldies channel at apsradio.com.
Real quickly before we move on, I personally want to say that when it comes to Michael Jackson stuff, there's been a lot of weird information that comes out over the years regarding, certain family members being called out for lies, they admit to lying under oath about certain things. So I'm not sure it's as cut and dry as people want to make it believe. I think it's possible that he was just a really, really weird guy and he didn't do anything sexual. I also think it's possible that he was a pedophile.
Okay, yeah.
But I think...
Well, look at this guy. I mean, the radar just goes off on me. I mean, I've never seen...
It's obvious Michael Jackson had severe mental problems. I just don't think there's enough evidence personally one way or another to say definitively, and there probably never will be. I also think it's possible that this was a shakedown. Because, I mean, you look at Michael Jackson, you can immediately tell, oh, he's weird, he's got mental issues. And, if I put my kids in there, maybe I can shake him down, get a claim out of it, because the public is automatically going to think, oh, well, Michael Jackson's a freak.
Well, Travis, I would say watch this guy's documentary and then get back to me, okay? I didn't watch it because I just don't want to focus on those types of things. It's disgusting. But I just thought his entire persona was beyond disgusting. And the obsession and the idolatry of his fans. Oh, the single glove and the sequin stuff and the moonwalk and all the rest of the stuff. Is like,
people
give me a break.
People are obsessed with Michael Jackson to this day.
It's just something that immediately turns me off. When I saw the idolatry and the craziness around, when I was a kid, around Elvis, it's like, yeah, get away. And then I saw the same thing when I was a little bit older with the Beatles. And it's like, it took me a while to be able to listen to their music because of the fans that were out there. And where does the word fan come from? Comes from fanatic. If you're going to get fanatical in your worship of some pop star or politician, I'm sorry, I'm out of here. Just can't handle that kind of stuff. It's such an incredible turnoff to me personally.
Prince is the one I really don't understand. No, I've never heard a song from Prince and I was like, oh, wow, this is amazing. Like, this is a song. It certainly is one of the songs of all time.
Well, when we talk about the impact of politicians, this article really kind of sums it up. This is from The Atlantic. Texans will decide if Jesus was a lefty. And they're talking about James Tallarico's campaign for Senate in Texas. And I think that's why this is an important race. Jesus is far more important than this country. Jesus' kingdom is far more important than America. And, we've got the Christian nationalism on the right. We have Jewish Zionism, and a lot of Christians who bought into Zionism. It's another kind of hyper-nationalism and idolatry. But this is the equivalent of Christian nationalism for the left, for the Marxists, for the LGBT. And that's why it has to be opposed. James Tallarico has come up with some very novel perversions of some quite obvious text. And, of course, when the left looks at it, when you got people like Stephen Colbert or people like The Atlantic, they haven't read the Bible. They are not interested in reading the Bible. If they would even do a casual read, they would see how this guy is twisting and inverting the stuff that he's talking about. But they're not going to do that. So instead what they'll do is they'll repeat the claims that these pastors wanted to kill him, want him to die or whatever. And it's like, nothing could be further from the truth. So while some might pray for hope for peace in such dark times, others are praying for the death of James Tallarico. This is the clueless way that the Atlantic article by Elizabeth Brunig begins. So James Tallarico, who, by the way, he knows better than this. He's read in seminary, he's read this, and he knows that he's twisting it and perverting it. And it really is kind of satanic in the same way that Satan quoted verses to Jesus. But the Bible says this, didn't God say that? And so I think our response needs to be, no, God did not say that. So he says, these people, these pastors who are associated with the group of churches that Pete Hegseth goes to, another guy who's basically twisting in a different direction, twisting the Bible for his political purposes. They said he prays that God kills Tallarico. They later on said, well, what we meant was he'd be crucified with Christ, right? And so that is terminology that is used metaphorically throughout the New Testament. Any Christian or anybody who's read the Bible would know that. It's the same kind of illiterate misunderstanding of Christianity that the Romans thought when people were talking about communion, that they were talking about cannibalism, eating his flesh, drinking his blood, that type of thing. And that was not the case with that either. But it's that that shows really what a pagan society we've become. And it shows the failure of everyday Christians to talk to people about what we believe and what we understand. We're called to do that. That's the whole purpose of evangelicals, right? What is it? It is announcing the good news. We don't necessarily have to convince people, but we do have to say what it is. And if you don't say what it is, then people have no idea what you're talking about. When you're talking about the blood and flesh of Christ, or when you're talking about being crucified with Christ, setting your desires and your goals in your life, setting that aside as if that all died, so that you can be risen with Christ in a new life. That's what's really being talked about here. And so these two pastors insist, says the Atlantic, as if they are lying. They insist that their remarks were not sincere expressions of violent intent, but rather metaphorical calls for Tallarico, a Presbyterian seminarian, to find salvation in their brand of Christianity. It's not their brand of Christianity. Every brand of Christianity except Tallarico's understands that. And so I think they even throw this in there. Well, he's a Presbyterian seminarian. I would just have to say, anybody who gives that seminary that he's going to a second thought needs to have their head examined. I think they're probably the biggest losers out of this whole thing. The fact that this guy is still a student there, he should be flunked. Anyway, Tallarico, they said, shrewdly responded by offering forgiveness. You may pray for my death, Pastor, but I still love you more than you could ever hate me. Well, it's not hatred to say that you need to crucify the things in your life that are separating you from having a close relationship with Christ. That's actually love, to talk to people about how they can have a better life now and eternal life forever. That is not hate, but it's always perceived as hate, isn't it? So again, the question is, does Paul hate him? Because, the Apostle Paul called for Tallarico to be crucified with Christ. He called each and every one of us to be crucified with Christ. So the Apostle Paul, was he trying to kill James Tallarico? Well, according to James Tallarico, yes. So again, he also focuses on his obsession with LGBT, saying God is both masculine and feminine and everything in between. Well, there's nothing in between masculine and feminine. He says God is non-binary. Well, I just have to say, if you are always talking about how we have to honor other people's pronouns, why don't you honor the pronouns that God used in his word? So the issue is that he rejects the fact that the Bible is God's word. So if you reject that, why don't you go do something else rather than going to seminary, right? Stop pretending that you're a Christian if you reject God's word. By definition, the Bible defines what that is. You don't define what it is. And so he quotes, he says, if you got a problem with Apostle Paul, right? He says, well, Apostle Paul said there's neither male nor female in Christ. He was not talking about a lack of gender. He was talking about a lack of division and how there was not different classes of people. He wasn't saying that the biological sex and gender were now erased. He wasn't saying that at all. And so again, he's constantly going through here when he talks about crucified with Christ. That's from Romans as well. But he just says, when you have God, he doesn't get to pick his pronouns because James Tallarico is going to pick them for him. And it is incredibly dishonest what he is doing. And so when he talks about there's neither male nor female and all the rest of this, what he's talking about is the fact that we understand as Christians that women have a different role, but they are not second class in terms of their relationship with God. What he's saying is that everyone, whether they are Greek or Gentile, Jew or Gentile, right? He talks about Gentiles as Greeks. So he says neither Jew nor Greek. So there's not a distinction. Jews are not special and all this stuff, and men are not special. They've got different roles, and but they still have either a relationship with God or they don't have a relationship with God. And he also says the same thing about slave and free. So what he's saying is that no matter your station in life, no matter what sex you are, what ethnicity you are, None of those things are a barrier between you and God. And Tallarico twists this into a LGBT agenda. Tallarico is a leftist atheist idea of a good Christian, said Allie Beth Stuckey, a Texas-based evangelical conservative who writes for the Daily Wire. She said he's uninterested in a foundational Christian principles like sin, repentance, or salvation. He also had a spokesperson for Turning Point USA accused him of speaking the language of evangelical while completely undermining the central truth claims of the Scripture. Well, no, he's not speaking the language of evangelical. He's not proclaiming Christ. And that's really what we talk about. We don't have to win an argument with somebody. We just proclaim what he has done. And then it's between that person and God as to what they do with that information. So I don't have to convince people of that. I just announce the reality of it. And then, of course, on the right, we've got the secular-based Israel worshipers, just like you've got Tallarico, who worships LGBT. And, of course, the prime example of that has become Mike Huckabee.
I get asked all the time, because I'm a Christian, and they say, well, why are you so supportive of the Jewish people? I said, you can be Jewish, you don't have to have anything to do with Christians, but you can't be a Christian and not understand that your entire faith is built on the foundation of Judaism. So for Christians, we look
at Christ is the foundation.
A moral debt that we must repay. And therefore, I don't understand anyone who says, I'm a Christian, but I don't really want to support the Jews. Well, how can you do that? But it is not the view of those of us who are what I would call biblical believers that accept that what the Scripture says about the Jewish people. In Genesis 12, those who bless Israel will be blessed. Those who curse Israel will be cursed. It gets pretty simple. I say
it doesn't say that
every day in this country.
He misquotes the Bible in the same way that Tallarico does. And I got to say, this is the same type of thing that I see dispensationalists do all the time, that constantly are removing Christ and putting Israel in the place of Christ. In that announcement to Abraham, that was, I will bless those who bless you, Abraham, the singular you, and curse those who curse you. And I say, oh, see, that's about Israel. And then he says, and through you, all nations will be blessed, right? Through your seed, as Paul points out, the seed is singular. He's talking about the Lord Jesus Christ blessing all nations, not a political entity called Israel. And this is where the dispensationalists and the Zionists get it incredibly wrong. They make the entire Old Testament about Israel rather than, all the kingdom prophecies they make about Israel rather than about Christ and his kingdom of heaven. It is something that we need to speak out against because it matters. And folks, it matters more than what is happening with Republicans and Democrats, far more than that. It's a much more important issue to get that right. An alliance with right-wing Christians has long played a valuable role for Republicans in the ballot box, and so has a relationship with a foreign political entity that they're completely owned by at this point. So Huckabee says, we've got a debt to Israel. No, as sinners, we all have a debt to God, and each and every one of us, as the Old Testament prophet Isaiah said, all have sinned and fallen short, right? And so there's no one who is righteous, not one, said Isaiah. That's why we need Christ. He was the one who paid our debt. I don't have a debt to Israel, and I don't have a debt to God because Jesus paid it all. That's the Christian message. Huckabee is selling you a perverted version of the Christian message, just like Tallarico. And I'm sick and tired of these politicians like Huckabee and War Pete on the right and Tallarico on the left, twisting and perverting Christianity. You better leave it alone. We're not going to leave you alone. This is far more important than your little career and your political ambitions. Stop twisting this stuff. So again, Tallarico has described Christian nationalism as the worship of power instead of Christ. Well, that's true of his Marxist liberation theology and his worship of LGBT. He's doing that because he wants political power. What he's doing is incredibly cynical. I cannot believe that somebody who, as he says, he grew up in a church, he doesn't know what crucified with Christ means. Come on. This guy is playing games with us. Tallarico will need to widen his coalition, but the moderate Christian conservatives and independents he needs to attract are likely wary of his unorthodox approach to faith. So even The Atlantic says it's unorthodox. Well, what do they mean by that? Quite literally, unorthodox means not right. So it's not right. It's not just a novel approach that never occurred to anybody in 2,000 years. It's actually wrong. So it's literally wrong. And even The Atlantic knows that. One person who is a Catholic high school teacher in San Antonio and a Democrat said he agrees with Tallarico on a number of policies, including immigration and strengthening the state's energy grid. But he said he's allergic to any candidate who uses faith as part of his brand. Camacho added that he found Tallarico's comments about the conception of Jesus implying a right to abortion silly and unfortunate and offensive. Yeah, his position on abortion, again, is a novel, wrong approach. He said, well, the angel announced this to Mary and had to have her permission. God is pro-choice. If she didn't want to have the baby, he would have aborted it. Whatever. So he said the conception of Jesus implies a right to abortion. And Camacho says that is silly and offensive. He doubted that anyone takes that kind of reasoning seriously. And I don't think that Tallarico does either. I think he is a dilettante. He is just telling people what they want to hear. The Stephen Colbert's and everything, just in awe of that. Wow, it's amazing. Look at that. He even turned Jesus' birth into an argument for abortion. Yeah. Tallarico told me that he does not believe in a progressive or a conservative Christianity. I believe in a biblical Christianity. He said, my faith is rooted in Scripture and in the teachings of Jesus Christ. He is a deceiver extraordinaire, in the same way that Huckabee is. And both of them are a reproach to Christ, just like War Pete is. War Pete is he is the antithesis of Christ's teaching, and it really offends me that he presents himself as a follower. As Tallarico calibrates his balance of faith and politics, he'll also need to win over non-religious people. One person said, I just feel that every time he's interviewed, it's just instantly about faith, said a non-religious guy in Fort Worth named David Strout. And he said he sounded exasperated. Yeah, the people on the left don't like hearing that all the time either. It may backfire against them. It certainly should backfire against Christians, because this is an important issue. This guy does not need to have a national platform to spew this kind of garbage. Well, let's take a higher approach to this, and let's, what is the argument for God? As I've said many times, my core thing, other than until we get into this Zionism and Christian nationalism and Christian Zionism and whatever you want to call Tallarico's crazy fantasies. Nobody's come up with a label for it yet. But other than that, my concern is that I want people to understand there's a God and that he has spoken. If you really believe that, you're going to investigate it for yourself. And Jesus has promised, if you knock, it'll be opened. If you ask, you will receive. If you seek, you will find. And so there's an interesting documentary that's about to come out. It's called The Story of Everything.
Today, I'm going to tell you a story which may seem very strange.
Galileo, Kepler, Newton.
Each tried to explain events in the history of the universe.
Has the universe always been here? Or is it finite?
Is there something else that would lay these questions to rest?
It reopens that question of ultimate meaning.
How in the world did this start?
The simulation theory?
The multiverse. You can't trust what's in front of your eyes.
Come on, that's ridiculous. That belongs in the movies.
We want to take our metaphysical hypotheses and see what they point to.
And I can remember him saying,
here is evidence for what can only be described as a supernatural event.
He himself made a discovery that shook his personal philosophy.
The fact the universe sprang into being at a definite moment seems to me theological.
And it is science that has revealed this. We're dealing with a system of manifold, complex design.
Force compared with a weak nuclear force.
1 part in 10 to the 10 balance.
Not
1 part
too
in 10
fast,
to
not
the
too
20.
slow. Turned out to be the tip of the iceberg.
We associate information with a rational intelligence behind it.
It had an uncanny resemblance to a digital bit string, very much like an information carrier.
You can read the same segment forward to get one protein and backwards to get another.
It struck us with a tremendous impact.
Without guidance, we would get a life-unfriendly universe. Many organisms have beauty beyond anything that's relevant for their survival value.
The concept of life as a cosmic phenomenon should have many consequences. The question then was, what does one do about it?
Well, again, it is the story of everything, which is about to appear. They have they're done by what was the company at the beginning? Was it Phantom or something like that? But
Fathom.
Fathom, yeah. It's going to be in movie theaters. They set up events where basically a movie will premiere for a few days in the movie theater, and so keep an eye out for that. It's a story of everything, a documentary based on Stephen Meyer's book, The Return of the God Hypothesis. And as you could tell from that, I mean, we're looking at everything, the theory of everything. We're talking about physics, astronomy, biology, especially microbiology. All of these things proclaim the glory of God. All of them show his handiwork. It's not just the stars. So they asked him, they said, what is this idea that faith and science are opposites of each other and conflict with each other? And he says, well, that's a great question because science began in a Christian context. You had people like Boyle, Newton, Kepler, many others who started to study nature in a very systematic way. Why? Because they were confident that nature had secrets to reveal because it had been made by the same God who made our minds in his image. So there was rationality that was built into the universe. If you believe the universe is a product of random chance and, things didn't work at one point in time the way they work today, what would be the point of studying science, right? When we talk about the laws of nature, you had to have a lawgiver, right? And so if things don't behave the same way, then why would you study it? It's because you could discover God's design. And that's really what people like Isaac Newton and many others were very explicit about what they were doing. So during the late 19th century, this idea, however, kind of receded and waned because of Darwin's evolutionary molecules to man idea of evolution. He said more and more scientists thought that they could explain the origin of things without reference to any kind of designing intelligence or creator. So we can kind of think of Darwin and his theory about the origin of new species and new forms of life. But then in the 20th century, when people started actually doing science, observation, in other words, when we went to the British Museum, they had a little shrine area that was set up about Charles Darwin. And I mean, was that when you were with us, Travis, that we saw that?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I feel like I vaguely remember it, but I could just be, you've talked about it many times.
So they had a little desk. They had his desk that was set up there and his equipment and everything. And what this guy had in order to observe life, we had like a magnifying glass, like Travis's son's got, right? Now, he might be able to set ants on fire with that, but he's not going to be able to see anything in terms of scientific observation about small life form, which is one of the reasons why I think he came up with the idea of spontaneous generation. If I set a glass of water over here, all of a sudden life springs up out of it. And it's like, no, the life was already there. It just got to be so much bacteria that you could see it. It didn't spring spontaneously out of water. And yet we still see that. People say, well, we know there's life on these other planets because we can see water there. It's like, well, water is a necessary condition, but it is not a sufficient condition of the kind of life that we know. So anyway, Then in the 20th century, and this is the story of the film, the story of everything, there were 3 great discoveries that were made. First discovery was that the universe itself had a beginning, and that suggested the need for an external creator, something or someone that was beyond the universe and outside of it. And again, when we talk about this, the Bible was clear thousands of years ago. In the beginning was the Word, Logos, and that really implies intelligence and design. And there has to be intelligence and design when we look at the way the world is set up. So the second discovery was the discovery of something physicists now call fine-tuning. And that's why I say it had to be designed, because if it was off just a little bit, if this was moved, if the Earth was moved a little bit further away or this or that, then it would be catastrophic to life. And so we have this Goldilocks situation. How did that happen by random chance? Well, the reality is that there isn't a chance that that could happen. And so this whole idea of fine-tuning, the idea there's very basic parameters of physics, the strength of gravitational attraction or the strength of electromagnetic attraction, or the strength of the force that's causing the universe to expand outward from the beginning point. All of these things turn out to fall within very narrow tolerances or ranges, outside of which life and even basic chemistry would be impossible. And then the third one, I think the most compelling discovery of all, is the discovery that our lives depend essentially on an automated factory on a miniaturized scale that is all being governed by millions and millions of lines of code. Yeah, the Word, right? So we wouldn't explain the origin of the iPhone without reference to Steve Jobs, right? And, we always look at this as like, who made that? And yet when you look at our bodies, why would someone not say who made that? Who did that design? If you say that, you don't really appreciate what is unique about it. That's one of the things I got to say. I didn't like science until I got into engineering in college, because in the elementary school area, it was all earth science and biology and things like that. And it was like a National Geographic movie. Everything was about evolution, evolution, evolution. And they dumbed everything down to skeletons and comparative anatomy. But when I started teaching the boys, we found a curriculum that basically looked at the unique aspects of very different animals. Take the woodpecker, for example. It's got a tongue that goes up and around its skull, incredibly long, so that it can get the insects out of the holes that it drills. And as it's drilling the holes, it's got special shock absorbers in its skull that are unique to it, right? And even has feet that are designed for it to hang on to the vertical trunk that is there. So you look at all these different aspects. If you take one of them away, the woodpecker doesn't work. So they all have to be there simultaneously. The simplest example of that is sexual reproduction, how complicated that is, and how all of these, both male and female, have to be there simultaneously, and all their complications, or nothing works.
That and flowers and
bees. Yeah, exactly.
You have to have both of those at the same time, or at least an insect that does pollination, or the flower doesn't get to reproduce, and the insect doesn't have a food source.
That's right. Yeah, people don't think we're going to be talking about the birds and the bees, right? Well, we are. Anyway, most striking features the presence of literally digital code, the DNA, that is directing the construction of tiny miniature machines that keep us alive. So he says, the question is, the one question that you want viewers to be asking themselves when they see your documentary, said the interviewer. And he said, well, the question that I think we leave people with is the sense of, does my life have meaning? He said, I did an interview with Piers Morgan in Britain a couple of years ago, and we were talking about this crisis of meaning, that people don't believe that their own lives have any lasting or enduring meaning. And, when you talk about that, my mind always goes back to Hillary Clinton, who always was about the politics of meaning. She used that phrase over and over again. I thought that was such an odd thing to say. And then I thought about the fact that for her, politics gives meaning to her life. That's why it was so devastating for her when she lost. That's the thing that gives meaning to her life. And I thought, how sad and pathetic that really is. He says, it makes sense if you are a materialist because nothing can mean anything to a rock or to a planet or even to a DNA molecule. Things only mean things to people. And yet we all die. So unless there is a person whose existence persists beyond our grave, beyond our death, there is no possibility of ultimate meaning. And I think a lot of young people, in a particular sense, understand that. I think it underlies a lot of the sense of anxiety that people have. It certainly affected me that way when I was a teenager. And I think when you look at our society, because we have lost the meaning of life, right? And because we don't understand what that true meaning is, that's why you have this rise in suicides and euthanasia and abortion and all these other aspects of it.
I mean, you can just look at that streamer, Clavicular. Look at his life. He's this wretched synthesis of hedonism and asceticism, and he can't enjoy either of the two extremes, even for the fleeting pleasures they offer. He takes so many drugs so he can stay up and be stimulated, and it destroys his body. Wow. He works out constantly, but he's, again, out of shape, and because the drugs are destroying him. Wow. It's just, he is a truly sad, empty individual. You can see it in his eyes when you look at him, and yet people aspire to be him because they don't think there's anything else. Like, well, I'm as empty as he is, but I don't have fun. You know, I don't get to go to these parties. I might as well be empty and be like him rather than have the nothing I have. At least he's got more nothing.
Well, yeah, I've seen his picture and I've seen his name a lot. I've not really looked into his life. I think when I look at these stories out there about longevity and how you got these people who, the technocrats who think they're going to live forever and they're doing all these different things. There's a guy who's very, very wealthy. He's a multimillionaire. I don't think he's a billionaire. But he sold his company and he spends all of his time on supplements and exercise. He even got blood transfusions from his younger son. This guy is obsessed. He's got every metric he's constantly doing to try to preserve his life. And I look at it, it's like, for what? I mean, it's about longevity, but it's about nothing other than longevity. And that's not a bad thing, but it's an empty thing if he doesn't have any meaning in his life. And he's removed everything else out of his life. He removed his wife, his family, and all the rest of it. It really is crazy how we get focused on different things. He goes on to say, so the evidence that there is a transcendent God, a God who made the universe and whose life will continue beyond our time on the planet, he said, I think that puts the question of personal meaning back on the table. It gives us a basis for thinking, I might matter after all. I might not be just matter, but I might matter. So anyway, there's someone who made me and who may even care about me. And he said, that is what is behind the film, the story of everything. Well, there's a lot of women who have been sold a bill of goods by our institutions, by our media, by education. They have basically been turned against men, against marriage, against children. And one woman was actually talking about this, the attitude that younger women have towards men.
I think we're very used to hearing about young men's negative views of young women's and sort of misogyny amongst young men. But this really struck me because we found that 72% of young men have a favourable view of young women. 7%, so not very many really, have an unfavourable view of young women. When it comes to women under 30, though, only 50% have a favourable view. The unfavourable view of men goes up to 21%, and then under 25 women, it's just 35% of young women who have a favourable view of men. And if you go into very favourable, we actually use positive rather than favourable, but if you say very positive, it's just 11% of under 25 women. So we are looking at an environment where young women feel a lot more negatively towards young men than the other way around.
Well, isn't that interesting? And of course, it's not just men and children and marriage that women have been taught to hate, but they've also been taught to reject and to hate God. That's one of the key issues with this. Another study, 2019, nationwide Gallup poll found the number of young women who said faith is very important to them was 41%. Well, that was 7 years ago. In those 7 years, it has dropped from 41% who said it was important to them down to 29%. At the same time, young men have gone in the different direction. 7 years ago, it was 32% of young men who said faith was very important to them. Now that's gone up to 42%. So the women have gone down by 12 points, the men have gone up by 10. And there's been a role reversal in all of that. You know, we go back and we look at what James Tallarico said. You know, part of what he twisted was the idea, when we look at Christianity, one of the things that was unique about Christianity was the fact that God was offering a direct connection to women as well as to men, and all the other civilizations and religions that were above the civilizations and everything had a very different approach. Women were considered to be basically subhuman. And so in Christianity, there was this, yes, you are created in the image of God, and you can have a relationship with God, that type of thing. And that was not there in the other civilizations over there. So that was one of the key things. I think that's been one of the key things in terms of why women are so heavily involved in Christianity. But that's all changing right now. They've been taught they don't want to have a relationship with men. They don't want to have a relationship with God. They don't want to have a relationship with children. And that is all a lie. They've been taught to give up a lot of things and to love themselves, right? And we were told 2,000 years ago that in the last days, people become lovers of themselves. And that is what they have been recruited to do. As a matter of fact, actually, Lalonde, a researcher, sociologist, said the story is more complicated than young women just rejecting faith altogether. She said, churches can't ignore how closely Christianity in America is now associated with a political conservatism. And she said that that is driving them away. Well, I would say that if it's about politics, whether it's conservative or liberal, that is going to drive people away, because church is not about that. And, you know, it's your relationship with other people who are trying to help to establish their relationship with Christ and with you, and you're there to help each other. She said, we're seeing statistically that young women are much more liberal, young men are much more conservative. I don't think that's the answer at all.
Actually, there are studies that show that men have become slightly more conservative, but women have become drastically more left-leaning.
Mm-hmm.
Men have largely stayed the same in their beliefs over the years. They have shifted a bit here and there, but women have gone radically left-wing.
That's right, yeah. Well, you know, the interesting thing is that, let's see if I can find this in the, I want to skip over to this and what I was talking about in terms of women losing their jobs. This is, as some of the people looked at this, and of course, our wannabe master, Karp, has said, well, we're looking at some massive sociological change because we're looking at massive replacement of jobs, mostly for liberal Democrat women who have high-paid positions in middle-level management and in the federal government. They are the ones who are going to be replaced. And there's actually a Mises article about this as well. A new study predicts that 86% of AI unemployment will be women. So they have been sold a bill of goods saying that career is more important than a relationship with men or a husband, and it certainly is more important than your child, and it's more important than your relationship with God. And so you put everything into this career. You're making a lot of money. You're overeducated and underqualified for a lot of other things, and then the rug is going to be cut out from under these people. We're going to see a massive societal change. And again, when you look at this stuff, it always amazes me. When you look at something as bad as the lockdown and the pandemic, God can still use that for good. And what did he do with that? He used that to educate a lot of parents about the reality of what was happening in their child's classroom. I mean, for 30, 40 years, I've been talking to people and about what was happening in schools. And they say, yeah, I understand that. But it's not happening here. It's not happening in our state, or it's not happening in our school district, or it's not happening in our school. And even if it was happening, you could show them that it was happening in all those different places. Oh, no, it's not happening in my child's classroom. I really like that teacher. Then they saw with Zoom classes what really was happening in their child's classroom, and they couldn't argue with that anymore. So here we are with a situation where the society has weaponized this attack against women. And that's really what it is. They are the focus of this attack.
Also, it's important, and this is going to sound sexist, but no one is immune from propaganda, but it is proven that women absorb propaganda more readily and more quickly. That's why most of the marketing that you see on TV is targeted at them.
Well, they like school, right? They'll sit there, they used to give Ritalin to the little boys all the time because the boys didn't like to sit in at a desk and just be taught all the time. But little girls like that. They get their pencils in a row and they set up all their books. They just love to sit there for that. And so that makes them susceptible. It's just a difference in the way that people interact. But what Mises is saying is that AI is coming for the notorious Karen who is overpaid for what she produces but still needs to see the manager. The Industrial Revolution took jobs from people who work with their hands, who did routine physical work. AI is taking routine paperwork, people who forward emails, who schedule meetings, and who sit on diversity committees. They've got big targets on their...
Don't worry. The AI can lecture and berate me for my sexism, homophobia, racism, just as well as any real person can, I'm sure.
That's right. Well, the Brookings Institute issued a study estimating 37 million American workers highly exposed to AI replacement. Brookings thinks that most of those will easily transition into different roles because they have broad skill sets or because they're smart. But they estimate there's about 6 million of those who will not adapt, primarily in clerical and administrative roles. Brookings estimates that 86% are women. And they work at big organizations, big corporations with lots of routine paperwork, colleges, hospitals, big companies, and government.
Well, don't worry, ladies. The oil fields always need more hands, so get on out there.
In healthcare, for example, hundreds of thousands of workers never see a patient. They only see paperwork. That's a good example. And they've got a chart here. I don't know if you've got the article there or not. But it shows the growth in physicians versus the growth in administrators. And of course, you could do the same thing in schools as well. And so what you see is the growth in physicians is going up just a little bit. And yet the bureaucracy, it becomes this gigantic mountain. It's just exploded what has happened to the bureaucracy. And most of that has come since 1985. It's worse with federal workers even, who are mostly women. And so the most expensive workers, the least productive workers, the people who fill up the middle-level bureaucracy. And of course, we could see this with Doge, right? Doge was looking at the same type of thing. A lot of these women may be low skill, but they are high education and high income, which they're about to lose. And that won't make them happy. As a matter of fact, as I pointed out, Alex Karp said, quote, if you're going to disrupt the economic and political power of highly educated female voters who vote Democrat while increasing the power of vocationally trained working class males, and you think that's going to work out politically, you're in an insane asylum. And so a study done by Anthropic, who has Claude, thinks that AI could ultimately replace over 90% of tasks in the administrative, clerical, and middle management, 80% in arts and media and law firms. So don't become a lawyer. During the .com website bubble that was there, website developers were supposed to become obsolete any day. But 50 years later, they're still here. Why? Because the work got more complicated and even the basic stuff got automated. So the vast majority of the 80 to 90% will reskill, including software, finance, marketing, and many other areas. The problem is those clerks and administrators, secretaries, sales assistants, and HR. Heaven help you if you are a diversity consultant who doesn't know how to flip a burger.
What's funny is, we're going to run a little bit over time, but what's funny to me is the whole feminism argument was only really possible with the advent of industrialization. When all work is done by hand, you need the strongest, most hardworking people possible. You need a workforce that is almost entirely men. There will be, of course, some jobs where women are more suited. And of course, on a farm, everyone has to pitch in. But if this is a large societal scale thing, you need a workforce that is almost entirely men. Industrialization comes along and you're sitting there running a machine, and possibly women can do that. And then we move into the technological side of things. You're just sitting at a computer. You can get anyone to do that.
Yeah. And that's, Brookings
and
Institute
now
is
the advance comes
Yeah, the Brookings Institute is a left-leaning thing. So is Alex Karp, and they both see this and they understand it. And they're not the only ones who are saying this as well. As a matter of fact, instead of replacing routine physical jobs, it will replace routine white-collar jobs. And so they point out this creates a generational-long blue-collar boom as automation itself makes us rich, which raises demand and pay for blue-collar jobs, but it will absolutely redistribute income and power from high-income, high-education, largely female white-collar workers to the plebes. And so it's going to be much worse. The plumber, who's already making more than many people, and it just underscores, there is a hope that, when we look at this, it's not a hopeless future. What you want to do is you want to focus on being able to do real things. And if you got children, focus them on some real-world skills. That's the important thing, because it's going to be a long time before those are going to be replaced by robots. That kind of ability to do real things is going to be incredibly important. There'll be more wealth, but it's going to be going to the people who can actually run the wires and do all kinds of improvisational things like that a robot cannot do.
And also, I want to point out, a good woman is a wonderful thing to find. I love my wife specifically because she is feminine, because she's not under these delusions like, oh, anything a man can do, I can do. So
That's right. Absolutely. That's true. Thank you for joining us. And hopefully that helps a little bit, give you some hope as to where to go in the future. Thank you. Have a good day. The common man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. But each of us has worth and dignity created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at thedavidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. thedavidknightshow.com.